right, thank you for tuning in. Busy morning here. Real quickly before we get into our next segment, two things. First of all, we are keeping up to date as much as we can with the shooting over at Forest High School. There's really nothing new to tell you, but if it's the first time you're hearing about it, the good news is there was nobody injured with life-threatening injuries. The bad news is there was a shooting, and somebody did get hit in the ankle. And so now there's a young man, a student from Forest High School, in the hospital with the ankle injury, and there's another young man in jail with a charge against him, I would presume. The scary news for those of you who have students there is that you have students there. That's obvious. So if you're going there to pick up your student, just remember they are not allowing you to get to the school. They are busing the students over to the First Baptist Church, a few blocks from there, not too far from there. It's the big church, the First Baptist Church. And you will need to have your ID if you're picking up your students so you can prove who you are. It's making national news, by the way. I found it on radio stations and TV stations, even in L.A. I found it in the New York Daily News. It's being covered by Reuters. So our little town. And this horrible story out of Trenton. Just the Sunshine State, right, Robin?
Yes.
Love and Death in the Sunshine State. This is a coincidence. Is the title of the book we're going to talk about. From what I read, I think this is a true story. Cutter Wood is the author. He's on the phone. Cutter is a poet. He's a contributor to Harper's Magazine. He served as a visiting scholar at the University of Iowa and at the University of Louisville, Kentucky. And it sounds like he was somewhere on the Gulf when this story happened. Let's find out about this. Love and Death in the Sunshine State. Good morning, Cutter Wood.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Larry.
You're welcome. Where are you?
I'm actually in New York right now.
Are you?
Yeah, so I wish I was in Florida. It's a little chilly here today.
Is it really? I see. We wish we were there because the grass is always greener, right?
Yeah.
The pavement's always more fun. Maybe that's what I should say. Are you in the city? Are you in Manhattan?
I'm in Brooklyn, actually.
Oh, in Brooklyn. Okay.
Nice.
So tell me about this. Is this something that really happened to you?
It is, yeah. So I don't know if you've ever been down to Anna Maria, it's a little island just south of Tampa Bay.
No.
I was actually living in Iowa at the time, and I went down there just to visit some family. It's this very lovely little barrier island. And, I stayed at this little motel, didn't think much about it, had a perfectly nice time and left. And then a few months later, I got this clipping in the mail from a relative that just showed this motel just in flames.
Really?
And yeah. And as, not too crazy a thing, but as I started to learn about the case, basically a woman had disappeared. The owner of this motel had disappeared. And a few days later, they found somebody just driving her car around in Bradenton, Florida. Not long after that, somebody sets fire to this motel, and then a little while later, her boyfriend tries to flee the county and is actually stopped just outside Ocala. And so I just really got sucked into this thing, trying to figure out what had happened.
The boyfriend tried to sue who now? I didn't understand what you said.
So he tried to flee the county and was stopped by police outside Ocala.
Oh, he was arrested here? Mm-hmm. When did this take place? When was this?
So this is actually a while ago. The case took a while. It took about 7 years to be solved. So this was back in 2008 when it happened.
So is any of the book speculation, or is it all the facts, ma'am?
It's a little bit of both, actually.
Yeah.
It follows. I went down there and interviewed tons of people, talked to the detectives. I mean, what really kind of sucked me into the case was when I went down there and started talking to people on the island, and it was just like there was some kind of mass hallucination. They were seeing this missing woman everywhere. They saw her at the Circle K. They saw her at the Salvation Army. They saw her looking disheveled and upset at the dentist, at the airport. One woman told me that Sabina, the missing woman, she was sure that she was in the afterlife, but she was going to communicate with her through her pet parrot. So it was like it had gotten these people's minds deep.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow.
So it's a lot of that, and then it also brings in some speculation about what exactly happened the night of the murder.
So how did you befriend people to the point where they would trust you? Did you flash credentials at them? Did you meet them in a bar? How did you meet up with these people?
A little bit of everything. That's a great question. Because it was a very tense time down there. There were 3 men who were thought to be persons of interest in the case. The woman had a husband who also owned the motel with her. She had a boyfriend as well. And then this man who'd been found driving her car. So a lot of the reason that the people spoke to me, I think, is because they really weren't sure what had happened. And they were hoping that anybody could kind of help dislodge some piece of information which would open this thing up.
Oh, wow.
So do you think that because of the love interest of her in all 3, that it does make sense?
I'm not sure I understand. How do you mean does make sense?
Well, because if for those 3 to each be a suspect, because she had to have had interaction with them all on a romantic level.
Well, the man who was found driving her car, nobody can understand how he was related to this case.
Oh, I see.
They just found him one night driving this car around, and they look at this car and they realize it's got really blood all over the place, blood in the trunk and in the back seat and on the driver's seat.
Oh my gosh.
It was a really confusing case.
So what did he say? What did he say was the explanation for him? Was he charged with her murder?
Well, I can't tell you exactly who was charged, but it was kind of a bunch of really strange cross stories. He claimed originally that he had spent that night with her, kind of hanging out, and she'd loaned him the car. But of course, that's exactly what you'd say if you'd stolen a car.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? So there were all these different people at cross purposes, and nobody could tell what was going on. There was even probably one of the craziest parts. As I was down there interviewing people, I tried to reach out to the sheriff's office, but wasn't able to get through. They've got this media representative whose job is just to be the blandest possible person in the world. And so I kept trying to call and couldn't get a hold of the detectives. And then they realized I was interviewing one of their suspects. They reached out to the university where I was working, got the university police on the line, and just told them, there's this guy, Cutter Wood, and we need to talk to him about a homicide investigation in Florida.
Oh, wow.
So I get, they knew I was just a writer, but they didn't mention that to these university cops. So I get called down out of the class I'm teaching to go down to the university police station, which is just like 2 little rooms beside the Buffalo Wild Wings in the mall.
Mm-hmm.
So did they want to speak to you because they were considering you? Did they think you had information?
Well, the Florida detectives thought I might be able to help. The university detectives thought I was a suspect.
Oh. Okay.
So I've been interviewing all these suspects, and suddenly the whole thing kind of got turned around on me.
Oh my God!
All in the span of yeah. That was a wild experience. It took me a little while to convince them that I was not some kind of homicidal maniac.
Right. So that must have surprised you. Would that experience right there prevent you from ever doing this again?
There are a lot of things which would prevent me from ever doing this again. I don't know how often you two have visited a state penitentiary, but I certainly don't need to do it any more than once in my life.
Yeah, right.
It's not a fun thing and not something I look forward to. And I visited prisons and jails a bunch.
How long were you in there?
So I visited 2 different prisons, and then I visited the jail, the county jail down in Manatee County, more times than I can count.
Okay.
Probably the wildest part of all of this, after the whole thing had been resolved, it kind of all in the span of a morning came to a conclusion very suddenly. And by that time I was close enough with the people who were thought to be involved with it that I went down there and was able to sit down with the man who'd committed the murder for a week straight at the county jail and just got kind of the exact details of every single thing that had happened in the crime. So that was probably one of the strangest experiences of my life. You just never have that happen.
Do you know you're in
And that's probably what would prevent me from doing it again.
So you're in New York, and right now, and I'm from New York, and I used to, when I moved away from New York, I always would hear stories about New York, and like people are afraid of New York, and I would say, well, those stories aren't everybody. There's like 8 million people there, so if somebody gets murdered, that's like one, two people, one that kills and one that got killed. It's not happening like all over the place. So that's kind of the same thing that happens with this. Now people all over the country are going to say, "Oh, the Sunshine State, we better be careful. Well, there's murders down there."
No. And in fact, I mean, I was very impressed with the work that the police did on this. It's not very common for a case to be cold for 7 years and to suddenly be resolved. So the detectives and the state attorneys were very good about it, and they were, I thought, really very professional.
Did your research help them?
It's possible. I think they built a very careful case in all of this, but it definitely was the case that one thing that the man had told me conflicted with something he told them. So, it's a small part of the puzzle that makes his story seem unreliable.
And what is the most interesting thing about this is that you were having a personal relationship with the woman who you would eventually marry, but you had to look at this other relationship to see what happens when one relationship does not work. And that had to have been scary for you.
That was the strangest part of this, yeah. So to kind of give a little backstory here, this disappearance occurred about 2 months after this woman, Sabina Musil-Buehler, had moved in with her boyfriend. And as I'm learning about her relationships, I had also myself just moved in with who was then my girlfriend, now my wife, for the first time. And it was not what I thought it would be, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody knows what they're getting into when they first move into a place with another person. Mm-hmm. But I was really struggling. There's small things, coffee cups in the sink and hair in the drain, but you really do start to have all these doubts and wonder what the heck is going on. And as I'm down there in Florida, I'm down there. I'm interviewing these people about this relationship which just went terribly, terribly wrong. And it's like they're having all the same problems I was. So I definitely felt like I had to kind of take a step back and look at my own life and think about what was going on.
Oh my God!
There's even this bit in one of the affidavits. The guy who eventually committed the murder, he was involved in an assault, and in the affidavit he said to somebody, "Why do you defy me?" And this very strange biblical phrase. And I had my head in these records so much as I'm writing this thing that in my own relationship, whenever something would go wrong, I would think to myself, "Why do you defy me?" And I just had such a hard time wrapping my mind around how both of us were kind of engaged in this same project of trying just to live with somebody else, and why it was so hard.
The book just came out April 17th. It's currently number 32 in the criminals category of Kindle. I mean of Amazon. Wow, that is pretty amazing.
I had no idea.
Congratulations.
Number 32.
That's great to hear.
How many books on Amazon? There must be millions, right? Mm-hmm. 32. That's pretty good.
Oh, I think there's something like 500,000 books published every year.
Wow.
That gives you an idea how many books there are on Amazon.
Wow.
Were there any children involved? I mean, did she have
thankfully.
any children?
No, she did not. That would have been, I think, a very hard thing. She was, in fact, part of what kind of drew me to this whole case was what a unique woman she was. She was very loving, very thoughtful, really beloved on the island, but had decided extremely early on in life, on her 18th birthday, that she was never going to have children.
Oh.
So that certainly made it, from my perspective, a much more approachable thing. I would have felt it would have been a much harder story to write if there had been any children involved.
You're a poet as well. Did any of this end up in poetry?
I'm more of a dabbler in poetry. My education was in nonfiction, and I love poetry. I read a lot of it, and this certainly has influenced my thinking. You can't help but have your perspective darkened by this kind of thing. But I've tried to restrict this to the nonfiction world.
As a nonfiction writer, do you feel that having been somehow connected to this, it made it easier? Did it make it more interesting able to write the book, in order to write the book? Or would you be just as comfortable covering a story that was 3,000 miles away and you never stepped foot into any of the places or known any of the people?
For me, this story, I had to have a connection to it, and it had to involve me. It's not an accident that my own life ended up in there, and that my investigation is part of the story. Because I felt like if I was going to scrutinize these people's lives, if I was going to try and figure out what happened there, I had to do the same thing to myself. That was only fair. So that's a great question. It definitely had to involve me.
Well, you had essays published in Harper's. What drew you to Harper's?
Oh, they're fantastic. They do this. They do such amazing work. They have this section at the beginning which is all devoted to short pieces and brings up all kinds of new stuff from writers you've never heard of. They just do, I think, some of the best writing and journalism in the country today. They're far and away one of my favorite magazines, and I felt so lucky to have a piece published there.
Cutter Wood is our guest. His book is called Love and Death in the Sunshine State. This is a story of a crime that took place down in, is it Maria Island or Santa Maria? I can't remember now.
Anna Marie.
Anna Maria Island.
Okay.
Off of Bradenton, yeah.
Thank you. And the other day we had this piece we did on the islands, on the barrier islands out of the best in Florida, and that one came up, so it must be a beautiful island.
It's great. It's very lovely.
Do you think we, as humans, do you think we gravitate toward places like that? I don't know. And do you think that's, let's see, how do we imagine life to be like glamorous or something, or relaxing, or just what attracts us there? And do you think that contributes to people having emotions that rise to the point of murder? I mean, that just seems like a crazy thing, because you hear about it. Seems like, I'm asking the question because it seems like I've heard several stories from like very popular coastal places that had these horrible stories.
That is such a good question, and nobody's ever asked me that. I think yes is the short answer. Both of these people who were involved in this, the woman and the man, neither was from Florida, neither was from that island. They both came there because they had this idea of Florida in their heads, right? And the book kind of gets into this, that you go places because you think life is going to be easier there, life is going to be more fun, you're going to be able to be yourself more. And when you get there and the reality is different, when it's still, I think people do sometimes crack a little bit.
Yeah, well, it's weird. I go to the beach sometimes and I see these guys that have leather skin, and I think this guy's been here his whole life.
Yeah, exactly.
This guy's been here forever, and it probably never became what he wanted it to become. He probably moved there when he was 18. Now he's 80. And
do you know if the motel was rebuilt after the fire? If somebody else purchased the property and rebuilt it?
So I think the motel is still in the same hands. The fire didn't destroy the entire motel. It had a number of buildings, so it's still there, and they're still.
Have guests come?
You broke up, Cutter. You're not there now. Are you there? Okay, I don't hear him at all.
We still got the light on.
Cutter, can you hear us?
There.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, there you go. Okay, yeah, you broke.
I can hear you.
You disappeared for a little bit there. Just say whatever you said.
Oh, sorry.
Say again.
Sure. I was just saying the motel's still there. The fire only destroyed part of it, and it's I think still a very lovely place to go, actually.
Oh, nice.
So would you go back?
That's a whole different question. I just have so many feelings tied up in that place now. There was definitely a time, when I flew back after this to kind of get this confession. It's just a very hard thing to do, and I don't mean to belittle the experiences of the people directly involved, but it wasn't really necessarily always fun. So to go back now, I definitely have a hard time spending time in Anna Maria and not thinking about the with other things.
Well, it used to be that if somebody was an author, we would say, go to New York. That's where the best publishers are. But nowadays, it seems like you could publish a book anywhere.
Yes.
Do you live in New York because of the publishing world there?
I live in New York because of my wife. She has a delightful job at the Brooklyn Public Library, and that's what brought me here, and that's my number one reason. But it is also a really great town for people who like to write.
Yeah, it is. Cutter, is that your real name, Cutter Wood, by the way?
You know, my father is a woodworker, and he has a sense of humor, and that's how you end up with a name like Cutter Wood.
I love that. That is so great.
All right. I did find this book on Amazon. It's called Love and Death in the Sunshine State. If you're looking at the interview podcast we're doing right now, it's the cover of the book is on there. I got it off of, Amazon thing. Doing really well on that Amazon thing, by the way. Do you have a website set up for yourself or for the book?
Of course, it's just cutterwood.com, CUTTERWOOD.com, and you can find all kinds of information about the book there.
Well, don't stop writing. I mean, we have a very fine gift, so don't stop writing your books.
Thank you so much for that.
Very nice. Thank you, Cutter, and have a great weekend. And come to Florida. It's beautiful here.
I will come back. Thanks for having me. And I also just wanted to say I've been following what's happening at Forest High School, and my thoughts go out to all of you down there.
Thank you so much. And we will give an update on that after the break we're coming into. Thank you, Cutter.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, we'll be right back.
Broadway's mega hit Mamma Mia is live on stage at Ocala Civic Theater May 17th through June 17th. ABBA favorites like Dancing Queen, Super Trooper, and Mamma Mia are all part of the fun